Welcome to A Note in the Margins. My name is Pete. Today's episode is about the Nicomachean Ethics from Aristotle. Enjoy. Aristotle was born in Stagira in 384 before Christ. Stagira is a small Greek coastal city in the north of Greece, but at the time Aristotle was born, it belonged to Macedonia. His father was the court doctor at the court of Macedon, and the king then was Amyntius, the father of Philip II, who is the father of Alexander the Great. Two things are important here to mention. First, Aristotle is a Greek outsider. He's from the northern edge of the Greek world, and he is not an Athenian citizen. He will spend most of his life in Athens as a resident foreigner. Second, I think his father's job leaves a deep imprint on how he sees the world. He's a scientist at heart, an empirical thinker. He looks at the world and he loves biology. He spends years on the island of Lesbos doing marine biology, looking at fishes and sea creatures, dissecting them, cataloging them. It's a real passion of his. And where his teacher Plato looks up at perfect abstract forms, Aristotle looks down instead at actual living things, at the biology of our world. His dad dies young, and at 17, Aristotle moves to Athens and enters the Academy of Plato. He stays there about 20 years until Plato's death in 347. Aristotle is first a student, then a colleague of his, but he doesn't agree with every part of Plato's philosophy, especially as we mentioned the theory of forms. There's a famous line, something along the lines of, Plato is dear to me, but the truth is dearer still. When Plato dies, the academy doesn't pass to Aristotle, it goes to Plato's nephew, which is called Spesippus. So Aristotle leaves the academy and leaves Athens and moves to the court of Hermias, the ruler of the city of Assos on what today is the west coast of Turkey. He becomes a close friend of his and he marries Hermias' niece, Phytias. They have a daughter, which is also named Phytias. Later, Hermias is captured, tortured, and killed by the Persians, and Aristotle writes a hymn in his honor. And hold on to that because years later it will be used against him. Around 343, Aristotle is invited by Philip II, the king of Macedonia, to become the tutor of his son Alexander. The most careful thinker about ethics teaches the boy who will go on to conquer the known world. He tutors Alexander for the next several years. Then in 335, now about 49, he returns to Athens and founds his own school, the Lyceum. Because he taught while walking, his followers were called the Peripatetics, which means the walkers. He runs the Lyceum for 12 years, and these are his most prolific years, when he and his students build the whole of Aristotelian philosophy, and almost every text of his that survives comes to us from this period in the form of lecture notes. In 323 before Christ, Alexander the Great dies, and an anti-Macedonian feeling erupts in Athens and all Greece. Aristotle, which is a Macedonian associate his whole life, is then charged with impiety. Impiety, here's what it means. In the ancient world, the city was a religious thing. There was no line between the state and the religion, and the state and the faith were one and the same. So impiety was the charge of acting against the gods of the city, introducing new gods or refusing to worship the city's own, or many other things. It's the same charge used against Socrates, corrupting the youth and bringing in new gods. In Aristotle's case, the accusation was about the old hymn to Hermias that he composed. And Aristotle was accused of worshipping him as a god. But really, it was just a political weapon. Impiety is almost impossible to prove, and just as impossible to disprove. Is not so different from the accusations we throw around today. You're Islamophobic, you're transphobic, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist. And they're really different. These types of accusations, they're really difficult to be disproven, but the person making them rarely cares whether they're true. What they care about is the accusation itself as a way to discredit whoever the target is. So it was exactly the same in ancient Athens. Rather than stand trial, Aristotle leaves. He says he does not. He says he does so. He says he does it so the Athenians will not sin twice against philosophy. So they won't kill him in a trial the way they killed Socrates before him. He flees to the city of Chalcis, where his mother's family has land, and he lives there just 1 year before his death in 322 before Christ. Ethics for Aristotle is about choice and action, and that is already something different from what we have in our modern vocabulary. Ethics for us means the study of morality, while in Greek, at least in that ancient Greek of Aristotle, comes from the word ethos, and ethos means character. So ethics for Aristotle is not about an abstract study of right or wrong, it is the shaping of your character through choice and action. It's about the part of life that could be otherwise, the part that lies in our power. So from here, the question I had was, what is in our power to make us good? So the first thing I had a little bit of travel with was, what is good? And for Aristotle in particular, who gets to say that? There's a famous dialogue by Plato, it's called Ep.001, that speaks about it. The dialogue goes this way. Is something good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it is already good? Because if things are good only because God says so, then everything is arbitrary. If God had called the cruelty good, cruelty would be good. But anyone who has suffered cruelty feels that this cannot be true. So it has to be the other way around. God commands the good because it is good, which means there is a good that stands on its own, an axiomatic good. And for Aristotle, that good is this: for each thing in the world to truly and fully carry out its own function. It's ergon. We have to remember here that Aristotle is a biologist, the son of a doctor, so he's hands-on with reality. He believes everything has a function. For example, a knife has the function to cut, a hand to grasp, a flute to make music. So a human being must also have a function, which must be higher than other living beings, higher than a plant whose function is just to live and feed, higher than an animal which also perceives the world and reproduces. So the human function has to be with our unique characteristic, that is the ability to grasp rational principles and to act according to them. So the human function is activity of the soul in accordance with reason. To be good for a human being is to reason and to act following it. And if you do it well, with excellence, that is virtue, which is arete in Greek. So if we think of a knife again, sharpness is not the knife function, cutting is the function of the knife, but sharpness is the arete, the virtue by which the knife cuts well. It's the excellence of the knife being sharp. So if you do your function well, you're acting with virtue. virtues are not born in us directly. If they were, we would be virtuous from birth, and we're clearly not. But we do have the capacity to acquire them through education and through habituation. Virtues activities shape virtue at the same time. So you become good by doing good things, and the doing is the becoming itself. And here is the idea that one of the ideas that struck me the most in the whole 10 books, because it's so different from how we think today. Knowledge is not enough. It's action that defines you. The soul for Aristotle has two parts, a rational part and an irrational part. Now you might expect morality to live in the rational part, but it doesn't. Morality lives in the irrational part. Because through habituation, the appetitive part of the soul slowly comes to desire what the rational part commands, at least in the good man. That is what it means to be good. The good man doesn't only know what is good for him and for others, he desires it. And that desire is what drives him. It's hardwired into his irrational soul. Nevertheless, desire alone is not enough. You still need to know what the right action actually is, depending on the situation, and that is practical wisdom, pronesis. Pronesis tells you what the courageous act is in a specific case, in what measure, towards whom, for what reason. So moral virtue would be blind without practical knowledge. So the part that says courage is the right answer to fear, that part is axiomatic, is good because of its being good. It's just the human function expressed in the right way. But how to do it properly depending on the situation, that's pronesis. As well as moral virtue, which is the desire for the right action. Intellectual virtue is the wisdom to find it. Aristotle maps out the intellectual side pretty carefully and maps out the 5 different types of knowledge that a man can have. Episteme, scientific knowledge. Nous, which is the intuition of the highest things. Techne, which is the craft. Pronesis, which is practical wisdom. And Sophia, which is nous plus episteme together, which he calls the achieved. If you want to read my notes and reflections on the book, you can sign up to my free newsletter. The link is down below. State. In the third book, Aristotle makes a point about personal responsibility that I really like, because it lands hard for what is society today, I feel like. You are responsible not only for your actions, but for the state of character that produced them. If you get drunk and turn violent, then the violence is your responsibility, because you are the one who put yourself in that state. You build the character that acted. If you act wrongly because of your ignorance, that's also your fault. He also says something very important, I think, about the sacrifice of brave men, which is a pretty deep concept. The good man is the one who actually understands what a good life is, because he is living it. So he, more than anyone, appreciates the gift of it, which means that when he lays that life down for what is right, he sacrifices himself. His sacrifice is the greatest of all, because he gives up the most, because he values it the most. In the fourth book, Aristotle talks about pride, and again, it's the opposite of what we assume. For us, pride is a vice. At least in the Christian tradition, it's one of the deadly sins. But that pride, that we call pride, is a different concept. It's vanity. Demanding for yourself what you are not worthy of, and often at the expense of others. For Aristotle, pride is something completely different. It's a state of character in which a man rightly judges himself worth of great things, and so the proud man simply claims what is his, not out of greed, but because he knows his own worth. This opens one very important idea in the book, that every virtue is the mean between two vices. Pride sits in the middle, on one side the excess, vanity, and on the other side the deficiency, undue humility, which for Aristotle is also a vice, as bad as the vice of vanity, the vice of excess. Once again, is good judgment that allows the man to find that middle. Aristotle also has a hard, clear thought about who can and cannot be reached. Arguments, he says, cannot save a wicked man, because arguments grow out of shared principles. You have to agree on the ground before you can reason together. And the wicked men don't share the good man's principles. So you cannot argue with someone. And especially you cannot argue someone into virtue. Character changes only through the slow shaping of habits. So this is why Aristotle puts so much weight on legislators of the city. He calls them the true craftsmen of the citizen's virtue. You can only truly reason with someone whose character is already solid enough to recognize a shared premise. Everyone else is shaped earlier and elsewhere by laws, by schools, by public honors, by what a society praises and what it shames. And this is what forms the next generation. And this is why I think it's such an important idea for our time. Finally, friendship, which is for him one of the highest virtues. True friendship, he says, can only exist between two good men, and good men are rare. So true friendship, the kind that is not driven by interest or advantage, is very rare too. The good man wants the best for himself because he recognizes his own worth, but he recognizes another good man as another self. So he wants the best for his friend exactly as he wants it for himself. The good man is at one with himself, and that wholeness reaches out to others like him. Now let's step back and look at the life as a whole. So every action has an end, something that it's for. And Aristotle draws a line between the kinds. Some actions have their end outside themselves. A shoemaker, for example, makes shoes. The point of the making is the shoes, not the making. He calls this poiesis, which is making. But other actions have their end inside themselves. They are worth doing simply for their own sake, and he calls this praxis. Virtuous action is praxis, to act according to reason with excellence, fitted to the situation. That's the action itself that is the reward. There is no prize afterwards. Is the good act is the good itself and worth doing it. This finally leads us to happiness. What is happiness for Aristotle, and how does it compare to happiness today? Aristotle arranges the goods in a hierarchy. At the very top is happiness, because happiness is the only thing we pursue only for itself. Everything else, wealth, power, honor, health, we pursue partly for themselves, yes, but also for happiness. They help, they make virtuous actions easier or larger, but happiness is pursued for nothing beyond itself. It sits alone at the top. And here is what happiness actually is. And I think it's one of the most important things in the book, because it's so far from how we picture it today. For us, happiness is a feeling, is a release of hormones, the quick reward of something pleasurable. For Aristotle, it is nothing like that. Happiness is a lifelong achievement, and it is basically the lifelong activity of virtue. When you act by reason, shaping your character, slowly teaching even your irrational soul to desire the good. The man who lives that way has reached the highest good a human being can reach, and that is happiness. It's not a moment, but it's a way of life. And yet Aristotle lives on one thread loose. He also says that happiness of contemplation, which is nous and episteme together, kind of flow, achieved state, is the highest happiness of any wisdom, of any good. So there now seem to be two happinesses: the lifelong achievement of virtuous action, and this other thing, contemplation, which stands above it. And that's the question I couldn't resolve on my own, so it's the one I'm going to take to the man himself, Aristotle. Good morning, Aristotle. I have a question. Is happiness the lifelong achievement of the good man that acts following reason with virtue, or is it contemplation?
Good morning to you. You have put the question as if it requires a choice between two answers. I am not sure it does, but the tension you have identified is real, and I will not dismiss it. Let me lay it out plainly. In the Ethics, when I consider virtue of character, courage, justice, generosity, temperance, I say that eudaimonia is the activity of soul in accordance with virtue across a complete life. The man who acts nobly, governs his city well, raises his children, deals honestly in the marketplace, he is living happily. His happiness is active, social, practical. It is praxis, action done for its own sake, not for some product it leaves behind. But then, in the later books of that same work, I argue that the highest activity of all is theoria, contemplation. The god does not act justly or courageously. There is nothing for a god to fear, no deposits to return. The god contemplates. And the part of us most akin to God is the intellect, nous. And when that intellect is active in accordance with its proper virtue, thinking clearly, grasping what is true, that is the most self-sufficient, most continuous, most pleasant activity we possess. So, are these two answers, or one answer with two faces? I incline toward this. Most men will find their happiness in the active life, the statesman, the soldier, the man of good character among friends and family. That is genuine happiness, and I would not call it second best in any way that demeans it. But if a man also has leisure and the capacity to exercise pure intellect, the contemplative life is more happy, not because action is worthless, but because contemplation comes closest to what is fully self-sufficient and divine in us. Solon said the happy man is one of moderate means, who has done noble deeds and lived temperately. That is well said. I do not contradict him. I only add, and if he thinks besides, so much the better for him. Let this stand as an outline. The tension you felt is genuine. It runs through the whole of the Ethics. But I do not think it breaks the argument. It points instead to this: human happiness has a range, and the fullest expression of it requires both.
If you also want to chat with the author, take a look at Stoa, our startup where we provide access to many authors and minds of the past. The link is down below.